Several months ago, I sat in this garage and produced a video about Ezra, Nehemiah, and Daniel chapters 9. 999, END, end. Ezra, Nehemiah, and Daniel. And I'd encourage you to watch that. It's not a long video, and I'll link it so that you can catch up with it if you've not seen it. I want to simply continue from that today with the passing of time by drawing our attention to Hosea. And in very brief terms, Hosea was called of the Lord to take an unfaithful wife and unfaithful children, marry her and redeem her. The book of Hosea is about the most unimaginable pain of a husband being openly and flagrantly cheated on. A little bit like Ezekiel 16 verse 25, when Aholah and Aholibah, who come in chapter 23 of Ezekiel, something of the metaphor of an unfaithful wife who spreads her legs at the side of the road, offering herself for any passerby. I think we're supposed to think of Gomer, Hosea's wife, like that and in those graphic terms, because we're supposed to relate with the pain of Hosea's heart as a husband. We're supposed to relate to the pain of Hosea's heart as a husband. And I want to just give you a quote today, which is slightly unusual, but it's one of the standout quotes from the 8-part teaching series that I did a year or so back, entitled I Am Jealous. And this quote that I'm about to quote is one of the most important sentences that I've read in recent times, in a book by a man called Ray Ortland, and his book entitled God's Unfaithful Wife. God's Unfaithful Wife, originally entitled simply Whoredom. And this quote, for me, sums up near enough perfectly the condition in which the church at large find ourselves. Now, you're listening to me, you will be a church man or a church woman, possibly. You may also be listening to me and have no experience of the church. You may look in at the church as it is in 2025 and be assured that your decision not to have anything to do with the church is perfectly justified, and I would not disagree with you. Looking in at the church, why would anybody have anything to do with the church? Such is our Gomer-esque, such is our Ezekiel 16:25-esque whoredom, unfaithfulness. But regardless of whether you are unchurched, whether you're yet in Christ or not, whether you're saved or not, or whether you are a Christian genuinely born again, as per John chapter 3, you're in Christ, regardless of how long that may be, this quote applies to us all, because this quote sums up the nature of the church as we find ourselves in 2025 in our apostate condition. We are languishing. We are experiencing the great difficulty of processing apostasy, the apostate landscape that we have all inherited. And this is centuries in the making, as I've explained in other places, but please listen to this quote and tell me if you can argue with this quote, if you can argue with this as a summary of the church. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know how it could possibly be that you argue with this. This is the quote. What one observes in Hosea's historical situation is the admixture of contrary theologies made congenial, not by logic of principle, but by fashion and feeling. What one observes in Hosea's historical situation, what one observes in our historical situation, is the admixture of contrary theologies, those things that contradict each other, those things that are a polar opposite from each other. Contrary theology made congenial, not by logic of principle, but by fashion and feeling. The fashion and feeling, like Gomer's fashion and feeling was to go off and have sexual intercourse with multiple other men, rather than be faithful to her husband, the fashion and feeling that is Antichrist is this attitude that we make that which is contradictory and impossible to be both to be true, the mutually exclusive realities of one Christian saying one thing and another Christian saying something polar opposite, hence the myriad of denominations and their peaks and troughs. The consequence of that is that we find it congenial rather than acknowledging how could it possibly be that all of these contrary theologies, this admixture, as Ortland says, how could this possibly ever be true, faithful? So I want you to consider, please, with me, the reality that we are all living in today, which is that we have these contradictory theologies and doctrines that we think are fashionable and congenial because of ecumenism, ecumenical gospels that are false. This thing of claiming to have unity within diversity, it is from the pit of hell, just as Gomer's sexual immorality, prostitution and whoredom was. And so this admixture is a perfect summary of the place in which we find ourselves, and therefore should be an encouragement, a signpost for us all, those who have ears to listen, as to how do we get out of this brothel? How do we move forward into beautiful, glorious fidelity? The answer is clarity of doctrine. The opposite of the admixture is something like a single malt Scottish whisky, which is pure, not mixed, not blended. What one observes in Hosea's historical situation is the admixture of contrary theologies made congenial, not by logic of principle, but by fashion and feeling.